I will call to order this meeting of the Winooski City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilor Bryn Oakley.
Republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, agenda review. Any changes to the agenda this evening? No. All right. Public comment. Are you here for public comment or something on the agenda tonight? I thought so. Okay. And I see no one on Zoom. For consent agenda, we have our Cannabis Control Board and Liquor Control Board and City Council minutes from last Monday, December 2nd. The payroll warrant for November 11 to 23, accounts payable warrant December 4. The resolution for Winooski Falls East Lot 7D and extension of the interest rate buy-down pilot program for the Housing Trust Fund. Any concerns about the consent agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Charlie, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to council reports. Would you like to kick us off, Charlie?
No, I would not, actually. No. At the moment, I don't have anything significant. I'm trying to, I don't have a date yet for the next Housing Commission.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's my update, I suppose.
All right. I just have one update, well, two, actually. The Planning Commission will be meeting next Thursday at 6:30 p.m. to follow up on discussion of proposed amendments to land use and the conversation at the developer roundtable. And then today, the city manager and I met with our two state representatives to kick off a monthly collaborative meeting throughout the legislative session to stay in coordination. Bryn.
Just a reminder that the Winooski Bridge replacement has an open house on Wednesday, December 11th in Burlington at Main Street Landing from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. There'll be light refreshments and some activities for kids. Drop by whenever you can.
I just have a brief reminder that the Inclusion and Belonging Commission is going to meet this month on the 19th, 6 p.m. over Zoom.
Thank you. I just remembered that the Finance Commission is also meeting next Tuesday at 6 p.m. And it looks like staff shared Housing Commission meeting is Tuesday the 17th.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Okay, city updates. Elaine.
Yes, just to follow on to Bryn's announcement about the Burlington-Winooski Bridge open house. If you can't make it, a virtual open house should also be available on the project website soon. Tonight continues the fiscal year 2026 staff budget presentations. Please stick around for the Public Works and Capital Improvement Plan presentation to learn more about plowing, paving, sidewalks, water and sewer, facilities, equipment, and more. For the full schedule of budget meetings and information, you can visit winooskivt.gov/FY26, that's F as in Frank, or fiscal year 26, FY26. You can also send questions to budget@winooskivt.gov. The Main Street Revitalization Project is scheduled to pause for the winter later this month. This pause means no paving, no patching, and resuming two-way traffic on Main Street. This will make traveling through the area easier for all vehicles and pedestrians. More details on all of the great work that the project team did this summer to come. We are also now ramping up our public efforts to support businesses impacted by the Main Street Revitalization Project with a marketing campaign. I'm saying public because this effort was informed behind the scenes by many people. The city, Downtown Winooski, and the Winooski Working Communities Challenge initiative worked with local stakeholders and businesses to understand the impacts and needs of the Main Street Revitalization Project. Over 30 meetings were held with financial institutions, government agencies, and business counseling providers to explore options for loans, grants, donations, and other support. Input was also gathered from communities with similar projects, including Middlebury, Brandon, and Burlington. We've posted a request for proposals for a firm to design and implement a marketing and wayfinding campaign to encourage people to support businesses on Main Street. A $25,000 Vermont Community Fund grant was secured to fund this work. So I hope the public looks forward to more information coming out of that, and business owners as well. And lastly, the City of Winooski is thrilled to join the 2024 Operation Firecuffs annual toy drive for the UVM Children's Hospital. Every year, this special tradition brings joy to children in need, and we encourage residents to donate. Donations can be made at the Winooski Fire Department Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Thank you. Moving into our regular items. First up on for discussion approval is a voter-backed petition for animal control. Jenny, please join us.
Good evening.
Welcome.
This petition was a voter-backed petition that I first received that staff received on November 22nd. The staff contacted the petitioner, who's a Winooski resident, that the petition needed 4 additional signatures. So it's 5% of registered voters at that time. So on December 4th, the petitioner submitted the sufficient number of additional signatures on December 4th, and it was accepted. The petitioner requested 3 questions on the survey, which is attached in your packet. Staff informed that the petition would probably be brought up on the December 9th council meeting.
Yeah, and I'll add that,
Yes.
we've been advised by our city attorney and VLCT attorneys that because this matter has to do with budgeting and personnel, you are not required to place it on the ballot if you because it is advisory.
Thank you. I appreciate that you also shared some data in the cover sheet related to actual demand for animal control services, that the PD is receiving less than 1 call per week on average for this need. So to Elaine's point in the attorney advice, our charter actually doesn't give voters the authority to adopt and reject budget and personnel decisions. That authority sits with council. I would say that regarding this proposal, 1, I personally wouldn't choose to put it on the ballot unless we were planning to take the recommended actions. It's a little bit, to me, it would feel disingenuous since it's not an actual authority granted to voters. And 2, with the low demand that's noted in the cover sheet, I wouldn't see this as the highest priority need for adding a staff role at that significant cost, given the feedback we've been hearing from folks about the tax rate and the other priorities and needs that have been shared with us by residents and staff.
Can you speak to the, Elaine, speak to the VLCT follow-up on Vermont Act 167?
I'm sorry, could you, let me
In the
look at
memo.
cover sheet. Yeah, so Act 167 says that I'm gonna get this wrong, that you can have a civilian animal control officer, but they would not be able to do criminal investigations, which animal cruelty cases, my understanding is they would be criminal investigations. That means you'd have to have a humane officer do that. A humane officer has to take a course to be considered a humane officer in order to be able to do those criminal investigations. Currently, there is no course for that training available. So until there was one, we essentially would have to have a law enforcement officer conduct the investigation. So the cost assumptions are based on that. Of course, if there was a training available in the short term, then that wouldn't necessarily be the case, that we would need a law enforcement officer to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an estimate. There's also the training aspect of the petition and,
Okay.
which
Thank
would
you
have
for
other costs.
Thanks for the background.
Anyone else have questions on this?
Yeah, I don't think I have any questions. I think my thoughts around this are pretty in alignment with the mayor's, especially considering even the lowest amount that was included in the cover letter would be a 1.37% increase to our budget, which we really don't want, and that it is a less than once a week use. And it seems like we've had this long-term partnership that's worked with Colchester. Yeah, I don't see the need to change at this point. And I agree that it would feel disingenuous to put this on the ballot and then for us to, as an advisory item, and then for us to not act on it in some way.
Any questions from members of the public? I don't believe we have any Zoom attendees. Go ahead, Elaine.
Just a point of clarification, it was, I think it was an increase of the tax rate, not the budget per se.
Sorry, tax rate. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so this is on for discussion approval. I'll remind you that motions can only be made in the affirmative. We don't do negative motions. So if somebody did want to make a motion to approve, now would be the time.
I'll also advise that it would be clear direction from council to make the motion to approve and then vote against it, as opposed to not having a motion.
Okay, great point, Elaine.
All right.
So someone could make a motion to determine that the petition is for an employment-related article and therefore advisory, and move to approve it.
Oh, starting with that one, right?
Oh, wait, no, we want to do them separate. First motion is to determine that the petition is for an employment-related article and therefore advisory.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Aurora, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And then someone could make a second motion to approve adding the article to town meeting day.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Charlie, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
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 Motion fails. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jenny. And stick around for item B, just cause eviction charter change public hearings.
Yes, so thank you. So staff has been in touch with VLCT numerous times, as well as our city attorney, regarding just verifying this timeline. It's a very stringent timeline that things have to happen to be in compliance. So with the help of the city manager numerous times, we confirmed this timeline here. So it's going to start December 27th, and that'll be the public hearing. It'll be posted, and then the public hearings will be on January 27th and February 3rd, which are the normal council meeting times. The posting will be done. The publishing in the newspaper is going to go into 7 days on January 8th and January 15th. I guess there's another timeline for that. The public hearings have to occur within 10 days of each other. The publication has to be 5 days before the first hearing starts. So there really is a stringent timeline. So hopefully this isn't too complicated to understand. I was just trying to put out what the possible days are to fall in the windows and to make sure that, like I said, we're in compliance.
Thank you, and thank you to both of you for all the work following up after the error that occurred with the original vote. It's unfortunate that we need to do this rectification step, but as I can see here, it's a oddly strict matter of timing compared to other changes. And I also want to recognize for the public that we unfortunately did not warn this item for approval, so we'll have to take action at a special meeting that we will select a date for and warn appropriately this month so that these dates can hold. But now would be the time for any questions from council.
Do you have a clarifying question? Just about our meeting dates. So can you confirm when we need to have the budget approved by? Is it January 21st?
27th, wasn't it? I thought January 27th.
I'm gonna look that up. I put it in the cover sheet for the budget last time. No, I wasn't on the cover sheet. It was my presentation. Hang on. Does the VLCT election calendar have a date for that? That takes into account the ballots? Because I just have a generic one based on,
Yeah, I just had
Guidance.
the January 27th was the.
do you want
was
to
our
go
scheduled
look at
meeting.
the
Sure.
election calendar?
Thanks, for confirming the dates. I just was wanting to double check. I know we tend to have weekly budget meetings. And I couldn't recall which date, which date we needed to have the vote by, so I appreciate taking the
Yeah,
time to
so
double check
I
that.
I had made a note that you have the option to schedule another meeting as long as the budget and warning are set in enough time for us to have the warning published before February 2nd. So we
Okay.
have to tell the paper and then all that,
Okay.
so. But Jenny might have the election calendar version of that from the Secretary of State.
Well, this needs to be done by January 3rd. Was the second date. This has to be
Brings us on the budget.
accepted, when the budget?
Yeah, sorry, I was just wondering, working backwards, basically, if council approves a budget before the 27th, if we would still meet.
Mm.
So that's why I'm asking about when the deadline for the budget is.
If we're going on this timeline, which has to be more than 30 days, less than 40 days, I was planning on, looking at the council calendar, that January 27th was the day. I don't see any mention in here, but there's a quick turnaround with preparing the
When they need to
ballot.
decide on the budget, you mean?
Pardon me?
Sorry, you're saying it, go ahead.
Yeah, with the budget. There's a quick turnaround to
Yep.
prepare the
So
ballot.
that sounds right.
Submit it.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. Again, I just wanted to confirm dates so that if the 27th ended up needing to be a special meeting or a
Mhm.
special public hearing or not, but it sounds like that's
To coincide with
Yep.
council's regularly scheduled
yeah, that sounds good.
meetings.
And I do know that it is a very quick turnaround time for you, so that, that checks out.
It does. But this needs to, the last day for this to be accepted is January 3rd. So this has to, this petition. So I thought I had discussion and approval on that, but I guess I
That was
did not.
probably on me.
Elaine has implemented a fix to avoid the discussion approval
hopefully.
errors in the future. Does anyone else have questions, or does this generally sound like something we can approve at our special meeting?
Yep.
Any questions from members of the public? Okay. So we will revisit that very soon. Thank you.
Christine, if I could,
Yeah.
just to clarify, if you could provide direction as council, whether, just to confirm that these 2 hearings during regular meetings are sufficient in your,
I believe that's what we're saying. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay. Next up, we have item C. This is on for discussion or approval. Winooski Small Business Loan Committee loan application recommendation for Dunwoody. Elaine.
So, we received an application from Donworry, that is a current restaurant that has been doing business in South Burlington. They are looking to move to Winooski, and I think she should be online. She was planning on attending, the owner was. It should be Summer Tao. Let's see if she's in the meeting. Paul, if she is, if you could bring her over. Oops, wrong item.
He is not.
Okay. Yeah, so based on all the materials that she provided, the committee is recommending approval for the full $75,000 request. That is the maximum amount allowed by that program. Opportunities Credit Union administers this loan program on behalf of the city, and they do a first review of financials and then makes a recommendation to the city as to which of the three tiers of programming the applicant is eligible for. The third tier is in case they don't have enough collateral or any other kinds of backing for them to be comfortable issuing them a loan directly, or an interest rate buy down only, or a collateral only. So they have been recommended for a tier 3 loan. And based on the information provided by the applicant, the committee is making a recommendation for the full amount. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Elaine, would you characterize the committee's assessment that the full $75,000 would be necessary for whatever they were planning? I ask because I've heard a little concern about the size of this loan given the current balance and that this program doesn't have ongoing funding source at the moment.
Yeah, we didn't have that discussion specifically. The plan was for them to use this amount to pay their contractor that's doing the fit up right now, and to add the second bathroom, stuff like that. So, and to bring it up to code. So we didn't ask how much that was, but her intent was to have that, her cash flow to be helping repay the loan and then to continue operations.
There was a quote from the vendor included in the packet that was presented to the committee. So we did have pricing information, and it was above the loan amount. The rest of it would be paid directly by the restaurant.
Thank you,
Okay.
Angela.
I think because it is a current business, especially, and from my understanding, seems to be one that has been very popular, that this doesn't feel like, say, maybe as much of a risk on the city side than, say, a brand new business. Because they've already established having customers. I know that I think they delivered to Winooski. I had some friends that were really excited about that. So like even a customer base already here in Winooski. And it would be really, really nice and I think good for our economic vitality to have that space filled.
My 2 cents is that there's, as far as I know, there isn't another Korean restaurant in the area. At least that's my understanding. Based on their price points for their plates and their portion sizes and their service, at least in my experience going there, they've got a really successful model. I can see why they potentially needed to relocate from where they were before in South Burlington, because it's a shared space over there. I don't feel that this is a risky loan at all, given that they've been so transparent about what it's for and that they've got the cash flow to keep operating and to relocate. Yeah, I think that I just put a lot of faith in this particular restaurant because I've seen the way that they operate. Yeah, I'm leaning yes.
Yeah, so I sent ahead a number of questions. Thank you for getting back to me on those. So for context, there is some information in the meeting packet, but it may help to give a little bit more depth of detail on the funding source and the history of use for these funds. I can go through what you sent me, or if you want to speak to it.
Either way. I can, since it's my words, with staff help, of course, I will do that once I pull it up.
I think for me, it almost feels like there's a separate conversation here about the funding source for this. Like, I don't necessarily want to penalize the business that we would otherwise give this full loan for, because the city is still kind of, I don't know, figuring out how best to support this resource. Not sure if that makes total sense, but I do feel like it makes sense to have that conversation. But I almost wonder if it's a separate one.
We could ask our finance commission to have a discussion about how is the program working and
Yeah.
should we consider changes?
Yeah.
I do think for transparency, it's helpful for voters to know what we're discussing, and that of the 8 loans distributed, 5 were repaid in full, and 2 had to be written off for over $42,000. So I do think that when we're facing a series of complaints related to taxes, that it is important for us to be transparent about what the funding source is, and basically, under the current design model, if it is self-funding and self-sustaining, or if the risks are too high, or if the model is such that it would eventually deplete itself if it were to be used in full. Additionally, things that were not, questions that I asked ahead of time about the committee's review, and again, Elaine, if you want to speak to this in more depth of detail, but I essentially asked, with this significant tranche of funds, we are also facing many businesses on Main Street that are currently in place that are impacted by the construction. We have heard from many of them that they are not interested in loans. I don't know if that will be the same case after a second construction season. And we are also looking at the Winooski Bridge replacement that will also have some additional economic impact. The repayment term for this particular loan is 60 months. So wanting to, again, just be transparent about the risks, about our existing businesses, about the repayment, the funding structure, and ability to confidently move ahead with this, knowing that if we do have existing established businesses that need assistance, that from this loan fund, that is available to them.
Right, so the original $250,000 for this fund came from existing community development reserves. Those were generated by debt repayment from the tax increment finance district. The remaining funding in this program was generated from a loan made for the Winooski Family Health Center. So it's operated as a revolving loan fund, and there's no ongoing funding sources, as council has been discussing. So it currently is not, doesn't have any tax impact. However, it is essentially self-depleting because of the way it's currently structured. The memorandum of understanding with Opportunities Credit Union requires us to pay fees. And since there's no income to the fund, then if we had one loan, well, anytime there's a loan made out of it, then we are depleting it, essentially, even if it was repaid in full. It wouldn't deplete completely, but that amount of the fee we would just be out that.
We also are paying a quarterly fee for a letter of credit because the balances that we have on deposit at Opportunities Credit Union exceed the federal insured amount, and we have to pay a fee to make sure that we have the additional insurance required. That is currently coming out of that fund at about $153 every quarter. So even if we make no loans, that fund is depleting.
So I would say, right, thank you, Angela. So I would say that since I've come on, there hasn't been a clear, I would call it at least, clear direction from council to work on economic vitality. Obviously, we can all feel that this year and have opinions about it in retrospect or during. But I do see this as part of like the bigger how do we get more strategic, more forward-thinking, instead of reactionary? This is probably feeling reactionary to parts of council. It's like, wait, why is there so little now, and what are we going to do going forward? If for us to answer that, I feel like it would need to be a concerted effort, and it might be difficult to do with current staffing without deprioritizing something else, which of course is always an option.
I know that Thomas submitted some comments ahead of tonight, given that he was not able to attend, and he had indicated that he would support a decreased amount. I would also support a loan, but not to the full 75,000 that's been requested.
Do you have a suggestion around that?
I think I'd be comfortable with 60,000, just slightly less. I am excited for the new business. I'm excited for the prospect of that space being filled. I've seen it turn over multiple times, and have a deep desire, as I think we all do, for that space to be filled and vibrant and successful. And I'm also thinking about our Main Street businesses. I'm thinking about in the not too distant future when we will want to have funds available to draw on for impacts from the bridge closure. So those things are in the forefront of my mind, even though that they're not in the immediate future.
Yeah. I think for me, even like a slight decrease doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because that doesn't significantly change the situation. So it just feels kind of petty versus useful. I would feel comfortable continuing at the 75, and then maybe follow up on the mayor's suggestion of having the finance commission. Maybe this could be something that council recommends the finance commission look into and come up with some suggestions. Again, also considering what Elaine said about current staff capacity, that might be they might be able to do some fact finding that then council can take, and then maybe better inform upcoming strategies and priorities.
I do challenge your choice of words for petty. I'm sorry, that is how you see my vision of protecting the interests of our existing businesses and the impacts of present and anticipated construction. So I'm saddened that you feel that my concerns about our existing businesses feels petty to you.
That's not what I was saying. My intention was that it doesn't really feel like it would make that big difference down the future without solving the core problem. And I don't want to, again, penalize a business, especially a marginal business owned by a woman-owned business. As we, like, it's all laid out in the application itself, because of, like, clearly, again, we have these needs, but they haven't been, they haven't been used yet. We can do the work to figure out how best to use this fund without, again, feeling like we're penalizing someone who reached out to use it. And I would rather see someone, again, when you mentioned that space has been one that turns over a lot, I would rather have someone really make sure they have that firm standing, and this is what they need to have that. That makes a lot of sense to me. And again, forward thinking to the bridge, this is gonna be a business that will be likely affected by that bridge construction. So it makes sense, again, to help them have that strong start. And it's not even really a start. It's a business that has been successful elsewhere and is looking to move to Winooski. That to me is really exciting, that folks see that appeal of Winooski and our spaces here.
Elaine, do you know offhand, for the 2 loans that had to be written off, I don't want to like create too much detail, but like, I'm wondering if there's any themes. Like, were those the loans we did during pandemic and or brand new businesses without like a solid foundation?
I can answer for one of those, and I'm going to look to Angela for the other one. So the most recent one that closed was a brand new business and had some staffing challenges, I guess I could say. And neither were pandemic loans, because actually, once they got federal funding, they were able to pay us back. So that was actually easier to recover that money. Angela, you want to speak to the first one?
I believe that the first loan that was written off was a new business. They shifted the focus of their business before they closed their physical location. So that may have contributed to the write-off.
Interesting, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the public? If you're on Zoom, you can use the chat or raise hand.
I do have a proposal for discussion. Knowing that we do have another special meeting within the next week or so, I would propose that we wait until all members of council are able to participate in the decision.
Okay, so we can delay decision here. Someone could make a motion to approve it as is. Someone can make a motion to approve it at a reduced amount.
I would like to move to approve it as is.
Seconded.
Motion by Aurora, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
I will vote aye. The motion carries. Item is approved. Thank you. Okay, we are moving on to item D, the Winooski Valley Parks District presentation. Ray, please bring our guests.
Grab an extra. Are you coming up, Lauren, too? Yeah. I'm gonna grab an extra chair. I'll take it. Alright. Well, happy to be here at the table with our good friends at Municipal Valley Park District for their annual presentation to council. We've had a really good, strong working relationship the last few years. I think are working through some history, I think it's fair to say, and trying to get caught up. I did do some analysis and shared that on just the past, 7 or 8 years of budget contributions to the Park District based on the request versus what we've actually paid, largely for my own information because I wanted to check some of my assumptions, and found it helpful to see that we've made some good ground up from where we started in 2018, when at that time the payments were actually done annually on, like, they might get it, they might not. It wasn't even a set 4,000. We were able to stabilize that money and then begin to increase it over time to get closer to the full ask. I will say, as part of one of the founding members of the Park District, when we signed on as part of that to be a fee-paying member. So this is us trying to get back into good standing and get that right. So again, I was really pleased to see the progress we've made. I think not surprisingly, because that increase has been fixed, we're starting to see that catch up annually start to compress a bit. And so I did want to flag that as something that jumped out to me. But again, I think we're still moving in the right direction, and especially when you hold the line item increase up against the annual increase for the full city budget, that annual increase for this line has typically been well above the full budget increase. So I think, again, a sign of good faith. One thing I will share too that we are going to be doing over this next year, and thank you to Angela for being willing, but proposing also to do sort of an in-kind contribution as well of about 10 hours of mentoring and sort of technical assistance around financial pieces. Lauren, as business manager, is stepping in to a lot of those tasks, and I think it's fair to say it's not your background. So learning, as we often do in these
Doing a great
jobs.
job.
Yeah, but I think to have someone like Angela who really knows this stuff cold and is a great teacher available on a regular basis. So that's about 10 hours annually, valued roughly $625 of fully loaded for her time. So really happy to be able to offer that as a way to, again, show some good faith towards getting that number up. I will say I did not include that here because that was a conversation we had after I had already created this document, but for what it's worth, wanted to flag that as well. So without further ado, wanted to introduce Nick Warner and Lauren Chakotay from Park District. I will close my mouth for a bit and let them talk, but we'll stay up here and have
We like hearing you talk.
questions.
Thank you. And welcome.
Thanks for your time. I do have a presentation. I'm going to run through it really quickly. It's useful for folks who are less familiar with us, but we are a hybrid incorporated Vermont municipality and 501c3. We've been around since 1972. We manage 18 properties within our 8-member towns, including Winooski. Or not including Winooski yet, but we're working on that. And all the parks are protected either through conservation easement or deed restrictions or other legal mechanisms. So they are all, we don't acquire or start managing these properties until they've been evaluated and protected forever. So that's the model. So we don't flip properties, we don't convert uses and so on and so forth. And if you could just push through this, I think there's about 35 images. There's just a quick map of our location. I think what's really notable for us is how, with the water quality and flooding issues that have been emerging, we have emerged along with that. A lot of our assets are within the floodplain, and that's an intentional piece of our operations. We keep pushing through. You can't really see this very well, but if you've got this document, it's fascinating to me how many entities are involved with the conservation of the Lower Winooski. This is informative in that it's an ecosystem of relationships and work that we all do together with city government, land trusts, nonprofits, and so forth. Keep going forward. We do a lot of environmental education work. We lease to Burlington and Forest Preschool at the Homestead. We work with universities and local schools. We have a lot of repeat programs coming back each year to various parks doing projects and service learning activities. Just keep pushing the images. Be great. Thank you. A big part of our model is working with volunteers, and it's actually highly functional for us. We have once again, we have a lot of repeat groups that come back. It's a way for Tim to really amplify his resources. We've done some work recently here in Winooski that was really fun and successful at Memorial Park and over Casamet, sorry. Keep going. This is a picture from the work we did in Winooski. That's our crew on the right. We have we have 3 full-time employees, and then in the summer we employ 3 or 4 seasonals. And I'll just go through these slides. These are just examples of our parks. That's Delta Park, and that's, keep on going through, just keep punching the slides. We also, this is an important slide, we diversify our income. We've been doing a fair amount of contracting work for our member towns on properties that they own and we don't. So it's a very simple model since we're all insured under the same umbrella. So that has been successful for us. We also have ramped up our role as a fiscal agent. We've got several nonprofits that we process grants for, and that is a great source of income for us. And we also, for all of our major capital projects and initiatives, we use grants and philanthropy and donated services. So it's all about leveraging our entire model. These are partners that we work with. Burlington Wildways, which Lauren is very directly involved with, is a program which I think might expand to other towns. It's been very successful. Its goal is to get people into the woods and do a better job of interpreting the various trails and recreational opportunities, and it's been really hugely successful in a way that we didn't anticipate. This is just metadata on our park system. We have about 1,750 acres total. And we'll go through these quickly. It's just images from each park to give you an idea of the scope and types of parks that we manage. Within our system, we have, I believe, 7 or 8 historic buildings that we manage, including the barn at Ethan Allen Homestead. The original home of Ethan Allen is there. We actually own that, even though the museum interprets it. And we own historic buildings at Colchester Pine Natural Area. Within those buildings, we have 2 different buildings that house caretakers, and they pay a reduced rent in return for management. So I say all these things just to give you a sense of how we operate and how we are able to leverage the resources of our member towns pretty efficiently, and it's part of our pride and joy to be able to do that. We have a couple of, you stop at this slide for a second. This is a proposed park in Williston. We're working with Global Foundries that owns a parcel down below it to create a permanent right-of-way and access, and they're looking to donate a parking lot to assist us to do that. So that's one of our more recent projects. And here in Winooski, we've been, for the last several years, talking and working and upgrading and researching and doing all kinds of things around the potential of Memorial Park becoming a park district asset. But in the interim, we want to make sure, I mean, there's a bunch of issues. It spills into Colchester. We're working with folks on the Colchester side, working with the owner of the building down there. We've done numerous invasive removals and trail upgrades and cleanups and so forth with staff here. And our next plan is to have a draft management plan that would propose how the park would be managed, that we can bring back to City Council in January. So we could have a lot more specifics.
Yeah, and I think one thing just to say on that front is, and kick me if I'm off base here, Nick, but I think one thing we really tried to do about a year ago was decouple the conversations of the budget and Memorial Park, because I think we were really tying those together a lot in our discussions, and we were just continuing to get stuck. And so I think we're really trying now to think about those 2 conversations simultaneously, but in different tracks, because I do think, and we've been very clear, we don't want to hand over a bunch of work without paying our fair share or what that work is worth. But I think by focusing on those 2 issues separately, it's actually really helped to kind of rekindle the conversation and get things moving again. So it's been great. I think we've done some really good work, certainly in the short term of like trail work days, getting some improvements done, getting some technical expertise on our invasives study that we did, but also then trying to start to think about longer term, and especially as we see more and more flooding in that parcel, what are the really complicated needs of a space that is right on the river, super archaeologically sensitive, pretty underutilized, pretty overgrown with invasives. There's a lot going on in that parcel, so just trying to, the proximity to Colchester, Nick mentioned, that's a whole nother wrinkle.
Yep.
So a lot of work happening behind the scenes. It's slow work, but it's continuing to trot along, and I'm feeling good about the relationship and the conversation. So I just wanted to
appreciate
that. Yeah.
This is an interesting image because the redder it gets, the more highly valuable it is from a water quality and ecological standpoint. And it is stunning how important Winooski and Colchester, to the left, as you can see, is in terms of processing water quality on the lower Winooski. You get below the dam, and it is really stunning. Cassavon in particular, Catlin Island, that whole area. And then you can sort of see the outline of the building in front of Memorial as you go further down the river. And, I wish we could see this image a little bit better. It's a huge gully down there. There's a lot of flooding. We are, just by necessity, we're becoming a lot better at dealing with flood resilience, which is a fancy word for how do we fix our parks after they get completely inundated. And Tim has introduced all kinds of new techniques, and you know, one of the early jobs on this park that needs to get done is to deal with shoreline erosion and the gullies and so forth. And that's becoming a big part of our work. And this is the final slide that just introduces. Your trustee, Bridget, I believe is online right now. She's listening in. We have a highly engaged group. They show up every month. They dive right into the details. It is really a privilege to work with this board because they're so deeply involved. So it's not just quarterly oversight, it's an iterative process.
And I'll say too, Bridget has joined us for a number of the meetings with staff as well, which is really great to have that board perspective, so.
I did see her online, but she might have dropped. I don't see her name at the moment.
That's okay.
But, well, I want to say how much we appreciate the work that you do with us, for us. And, you know, for me, I think we are still committed to catching up on our dues. I think I brought this up last year and have thought about it. Not in a position for any decision making right now, but I do wonder, especially with the numbers you shared, Ray, if we need to increase that annual step to get there get closer faster. So that's something I've been thinking of.
Sure.
And I also appreciate the decoupling of the budget and parks management decisions. I do feel like that will be easier to navigate, and potentially one can precede the other. Maybe we can come to a decision on park management and then follow that with, here's how we're gonna change our financial commitment, instead of waiting for a budget approval and then trying to figure that out.
Okay.
No, I appreciate that, and again, we have a goal within our budget presentation in early January that relates to parks planning and Memorial Park, so there'll be more to come on that. And like Nick was saying, we're gonna continue to work on this draft management plan over the next month and try to have something hopefully rough in hand by early in the new year to share. So more to come, but exciting work, and really appreciate the partnership for sure.
We have all here seen the presentation before
Yes.
and know a bit about your work, but do councilors have any questions or comments to share?
I joined the group in doing some Memorial Park maintenance and cleanup in November. It really is a gorgeous space and natural area. Really grateful to have that. And I also saw the impacts of the erosion and the cliffs that are happening on the edge of the banks there. And have done some habitat restoration work through AmeriCorps myself, so I know what it goes into that, and have been in freezing cold temperatures and rain that feels like it'll never end for days and weeks on end. So I know how difficult that is, how grueling that work can be. So it's really awesome to see just how many people showed up for that kind of chilly November day, and seeing the photos of the volunteers and the dedicated folks in and around, the community for all your parks that commit the time to it. So really excited to see a little bit more about the management plan in the new year.
Yep.
And really excited to also hear about more opportunities to volunteer myself.
Awesome.
So thank you.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other council questions?
Thanks for your time.
Let me invite
Yes.
if there's any members of the public who have questions for Winooski Valley Parks District. Judy, please join us for the microphone.
I'm Judy Lanson, I live in Winooski, and I'd like to echo Bryn's comments. I was there in the November workday too. It was the first time, I've lived here over 30 years, and it was the first time I'd ever been in that park, which is shameful, but, and I too saw the erosion, and man, there are a lot of invasives in there.
Yep.
And I would definitely look forward to what you're gonna come up with for a preliminary management plan for there, because we can use it. And I do think the work you do is great, and I don't know how long Winooski has been a member.
A long time.
Long
Do
time.
you know?
72.
Yeah.
An original member.
Okay, okay, that's great. And when you do, I know that your organization did some trailside mowing in there before the.
Yes,
Now, did we pay you for that? Was that a contracted service?
that
Okay,
was, yes.
Okay.
But
all
us, then I think we, like the last time was a volunteer thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So
It's a mix.
So
It's a
sort of
mix
split the
right
difference.
now.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to comment that I think it's a great organization, and we certainly should work to do what we can to support it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. And if you're online, again, you can use chat or raise hand if you wish to make comment. Anyone else? Well, thank you again for coming in and for your work, and look forward to reconnecting in the new year.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Lynn.
Okay, we are on item E, the fiscal year 26 budget presentation for Public Works and Capital.
Great, thanks. I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. Okay. So tonight we're discussing the Public Works and Capital Fund budget. So that actually includes 4 different divisions of our budget. So first I'll talk about kind of an overview of what we did this past year, what we're currently doing for the FY25 fiscal year, and then I'll get into the Public Works annual operation budget. And then the general fund capital plan, which covers all general fund departments. And then finally, the 2 enterprise funds, the water and sewer funds. So at the end of each one, I'll stop for questions, or if you have questions at the end, whatever is easiest. So to start off, this is just covering this current year. So, you know, we're a little over halfway in this current fiscal year that started in July. But as we've been discussing, the 3 main projects we've been working on are the large bond boat projects. So Main Street, the bridge, and Lot 7D. So Main Street and Lot 7D are, you know, in construction. The bridge is still sort of on the design table at this point, but that is going to get into construction in 2027. And I'd say for Main Street in particular that it's been a pretty successful year on the construction side, and that the contractor has put in most of the underground utilities, specifically water, sanitary sewer, and a lot of the underground gas that was contracted with Vermont Gas Systems. They've also completed a large portion of the transportation work south of East Spring Street. So you can kind of get a sense of what the corridor will look like roughly. There's new curbing in. They've installed some of the sidewalk and some of the tree planting area. So that pavement is it's still the final base pavement, but they still have to put a top course on that. Everything north is temporary pavement just for the winter time. So, yeah, so pretty successful year. The projects within budget we're on schedule to finish next year. That's even with the contractor, having to pull some crews to do some flood emergency work. So overall, that has been successful. The other projects that are listed here, I won't read through them all, but those are primarily capital projects that were approved in FY25 that we have made some significant progress or completed. So for example, the one that is not necessarily a capital project is the Hoods Crossing traffic signal. So at one of the earlier council meetings, we signed a federal highways grant for that project. So that project will be 100% federally funded once that gets going. So one of the big numbers I want to really kind of advocate for, promote, is for our city infrastructure, we've had $34,700,000 in grants, state, federal funding to support, and it's these projects that are on this screen. So primarily the bridge, that's around over 20 million in supporting funds from the state and Fed. Main Street's around $5 million in grant funding specifically. And then there's the Hood's Crossing is about 1.1 million based on our scoping study estimate. So that could be more, but that will be 100% federally funded. So something you all should be very proud of is we're definitely getting our take in grants and state federal funds. So yeah, I just want to make sure, as folks are saying, hey, get more grants, like we've been doing a pretty good job. There's obviously room to get more funding and more grants, but if you take that number versus our grant list or versus our capital debt, I'd say, we could probably go against any municipality in the state to, for as much money as we're bringing in to the city. For FY26, much of the same. So as mentioned, Main Street will continue into its second season, primarily transportation, surface work. So then you'll start seeing sort of the final construction pieces of that project. Lot 7D, the garage itself is estimated to be completed in the fall of 2025, with the hotel and housing completed later in the spring of 2026. And then the bridge, again, that's still going to be kind of on the drawing board, but further into design, starting to get into more right-of-way acquisitions, putting together design build request for proposal, kind of putting the final details on that design build bid to get that out. And then other items, whatever we approve at the end of this FY26 capital plan, which we'll discuss later. We'll get into design phase with the Hood Crossing signal, do some public outreach. We do have some stormwater work to do this upcoming season. We have a regulatory phosphorus control plan that we have some grant scope to complete. We have a downtown stormwater permit that we have to make some decisions on whether we wrap it into our overall MS4 permit. So a few things stormwater related. And then as mentioned at your last meeting, our parking garage elevator is in very poor condition. So we're just starting to talk with a consultant about putting a plan together to review that. And then the other big takeaway for us, at least with our team, is our utility manager is retiring at the end of this year, which will be a big loss for us. He's been a huge part of the water resources team and a leader on the DPW crew. So he will be sorely missed, and some big shoes to fill, definitely. So speaking of our team, this is our org chart, the same pretty much from previous years. We separate it into sort of our streets, grounds, facilities crew on the left-hand side, which is general fund primarily, and then on the right side is our treatment plant and distribution water resources team. So as mentioned, previous years, pretty small team, but they are amazing. They do a ton of work. So they're out there, you can hear them scraping tonight, So really proud of them. They, primarily we are, or I should say one thing we're looking at right now is utility manager position. As mentioned, he's retiring. So that sort of org chart could change a little bit. That could become an EO3 position potentially if we don't find that type of candidate. So that could change some of the water sewer funding that we'll discuss later.
While you're changing slides, I just have to say that I've had occasion to come across the public works crew doing work, and we don't hear about them very often. And I'll be like, did we do that, or did we contract for that? And I'm like, we did it. So it's a sign of how skilled our particular team is.
Yeah, I've worked in other municipalities in this role, and this team's really good, like really solid team. So really, we're very lucky to have them. Before I get into the annual public works budget, any questions on sort of overview, background items? Okay,
Please
so.
proceed.
Yeah, so the general fund annual operations budget, it consists of those three divisions: engineering, streets, and grounds and facilities. In total, it's about 1.5 million, 1.468215, which is about 4.8% higher than last year's FY20 budget. That's primarily due to salaries and benefits. We haven't really added any, I'd say, scope or any new items from previous years. But as you can see, this is generally what those divisions are made of. As you get the detailed budget, you'll see, the account line breakouts of what each of those items are. But generally, it's what you'd expect public works: roads, sewers, buildings, your electric bill, any contract work. Sort of getting into the numbers, very high level, but this is that breakdown of the total budget in sort of the division between those three categories and the general sort of salaries, materials, utilities breakdown, just so you can get a sense of where that money is being spent. So as noted, most of it is in the salaries and benefits line at 63%, followed by materials and equipment. And then on the more of the division side, the majority is in the streets division. It's 60% of the budget. And then down below, you can see those are kind of the top cost centers for each of those three divisions, excluding salaries and benefits. So streets, the main cost centers, vehicle and equipment maintenance. We have a pretty large fleet that we have to maintain. And then road salt's number 2. So that's why we do spend a lot of time thinking about, liquid ice application and how do we get that number down. So that's why we brought the brine system to you all last year. So this number is a little bit less than previous years because we do number. This year we're using, I think, 600 tons. Some of that is just historical. Like last year we didn't use a lot of salt, but we also think we're going to see a reduction using the brine system. And then on the grounds and facilities side, electrics are a big cost center. Streetlights are fairly large costs for the city, and then all of the building electric costs are included in that number. And then, surprisingly, custodial contract services are up there too. So all of our facilities, we recently rebid that too, and that is our low bidder for that contract service. So something that we're going to probably keep an eye on how we can, somehow reduce that number because it is fairly high. And then on the engineering side, we don't have a lot of costs other than salaries, but we are carrying that traffic calming evaluation cost in there. So that's 2 basically traffic calming evaluations. So we completed 1 this year, and then we went to the Municipal Infrastructure Commission, selected a candidate. They've performed the data collection, so we're waiting on the report for the second one right now. And then this is just a general sort of comparison between the years. You will see there's a couple anomalies in the FY24 actual versus budget, particularly in the buildings line. So FY24 was 76,000. FY24 actual is 124. That represents we were low on staffing for that year, so we contracted out some of our mowing and plowing, so that's why that number's inflated. And then on the, I think it's a contract line is quite a bit higher. So that actually is our line striping contract. So what you don't see is the funding from reserve request from a previous year for that line striping work. So that is all of the line striping work that happened in FY24. I think we budgeted 20 grand and it ended up being the full like 60 or 70,000 that they still had to do. But yeah, as you can see, we're usually right around 1.3, 1.4 million in total for operations. And then in the budget books, you'll see like each of the breakouts, if you have any questions when you see those line items. Any questions on the general fund operations, DPW, at this point?
Are you fully staffed now?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
No, unfortunately, no. We're still missing one EO2, which is our CDL plow drivers, which they're very challenging to find. And we do have one seasonal EO1 that we just brought on board that he's been trained up in the sidewalk plow, but we're still looking for a full-time EO1 position. So we'll be okay for the winter, but we're still looking. And we are also trying to train up our EO1s internally to EO2s and get their CDL.
Okay.
So looking at this table, it seems like there's, been a rather measurable jump from FY23 actual to proposed FY26, but it's really kind of the bulk of that change really is in the first two lines in salaries and benefits.
Absolutely. Yep.
But we, as you know, we've got a really great team, so.
Yeah, I will say, like, I've worked, like I mentioned, I've worked in other municipalities and similar sized municipalities, and their departments were, their field crew staffs were much larger. And I think you're getting more bang for your buck out of our crew than that crew, I would say. So yeah, we've got a really good team.
Well, thanks for the additional depth of detail here, and kind of looking forward to the additional slide content you have here. And you already beat me to answering my question about on the previous slide about road salt reduction in estimated expenses, given that Brian Maker was approved this past budget season. So, thanks for covering that.
Sure.
I appreciate council and the community supporting that expense even in a challenging year last year.
Yeah, and one other note on that is we've had a lot of interest from other municipalities, even bigger municipalities that you would think would take the lead on something like that, that they want to dip their toe into brine making and they're interested in potentially buying brine from us. So we have the brine maker. It's getting, we've done some utility work this past week, and the vendor's coming tomorrow to get it all installed. So we should be operational by the end of this week and start using it. Yep.
Great.
All right, so I will move into the capital plan. So the capital plan, I know you've all seen this probably a bazillion times, but just a quick overview on what it is for the general public. So capital plan, high level, is all our really expensive stuff that we have to either finance or, in some instances, it's a one-time capital expense like road paving. But the idea is that, we're going to have a 5-year outlook so we can be, financially prudent on how we're spending our funds. And it also allows us to roll over funding, so we can put money into reserves for future expenses, which is nice when we're trying to save up for like a bigger expense and we don't want to, pay for that interest. So this just highlights in our policy what defines a capital asset or a capital project, and it's what you would expect or what the general public would expect, those large purchases of fire truck, for example, or a large construction project. That's a typical capital project. So very high level, our total FY26 proposed budget is 1.792508. Sounds like a huge number until you start taking away from that. So on the right side is our already designated funds for the Main Street project and Myers Pool capital project. For the general public, back in FY19, when those projects were coming together, the city move forward with finding additional revenues to basically support those projects. So that's revenue from local option tax, partial revenue that was coming back to the city through the tax increment finance district. And then there was a rate increase in FY19 that partially helped pay for those two projects. So you can kind of see on the bottom, so the Myers Pool debt, that is, obviously that is in place and we've been making payments. That's a $3.4 million debt over 20 years. So our annual payment's about $243,000. The Main Street project debt for the general fund portion is estimated to be $3.6 million. We would be using USDA loan financing for this. So it's a 30-year loan with an $805,000 annual payment. And we expect that to start in FY27. So this funding actually that we've already designated, we don't need to do a tax increase. This is already set from FY19, which looking back is pretty amazing that we were able to like hold that number from FY19. A lot of that is we were able to find grants and we held on to that USDA financing that was a low interest loan, which really helped us. So we're basically using our interest rate from 2018 for financing that we'll be paying on in FY27. So that is not really changing, or that's pretty much set at this point. So then if you go back over to the right-hand side, that's where there's flexibility. So this is basically what's left. So the capital funding for FY26, the remainder would be $710,961. But out of that, there's already existing debt of $395,014. So at the end of the day, we've got $315,946 to utilize for either new debt or capital expenses. And then this is just the breakdown of the debt. So as you can see, we're not proposing any new debt for FY26. It's pretty fairly split between fleet replacements on the existing side, fleet replacements, and road reconstruction projects. So just some highlights for this FY26 budget. So we do anticipate the tower truck debt starting. What's shown is just an estimate. I think Angela's probably working on it literally right now, the application for financing that. We anticipate it's probably around a $64,000 annual payment. We also have our most recent plow truck, that debt payment starting. That's about a $32,000 payment. That's a 5-year term because we do roll those trucks over roughly every 10 years. And then we do have some final last payments coming in FY26, so those will come off the books. One of our plow trucks, one of our sidewalk plows, and one of the command vehicles. So No new debt proposed for this year, which is good. We got enough debt coming online with Main Street in the last few years, so nothing on that end. And then for capital expenses, this is where there is a lot of flexibility and where we've had obviously a lot of discussion. So right now there are 10 projects, assets proposed. The ones highlighted in gray we're proposing to use reserve funding for, and then the ones I've just highlighted in blue, there's a few slides after this that just give some additional detail. Item 1 is the annual street resurfacing. We do have a pretty good reserve. I think it's around 250,000 that's designated to street resurfacing. That is primarily because we missed one season because we were trying to get the Main Street project going. So we are proposing to use a portion of that reserve for this coming FY26, and I'll show you the streets that we're targeting. The item 2 that we discussed last year, so that is the curbing and sidewalk replacement. I left that on here just so you're aware that we're going to be working on that this winter to start some design work and try to get that bid out over this winter. And then we do have some fleet replacements. So fire department has an older 2014 passenger vehicle, command vehicle that they're looking to replace. And then PD has their annual patrol car replacement in there as well. And then we are looking at, for this building, we've got a 2003 very old furnace that we're looking at replacing. Councilor Oakleaf, I saw your comments and agree. We're trying to look at, and the reason we're doing this now is we're trying to find some grant funding, basically. So we want to put in the capital plan and look at potential options for a heat pump or something more efficient to convert that. So I don't think 12,300 is probably going to do the job.
It didn't
but
look realistic, but I,
yeah.
I wasn't
So
sure.
this is our, like, let's put in the capital plan and chase some grants idea. And then we do have a very old emergency generator at the fire department that the chief would really like us to replace. I think it's like a hand-me-down from another facility, and it's probably not long for this world. So we do want to get that replaced because that's obviously a very crucial building to keep active.
Has that, I don't recall that coming up last year. Has something happened that's coming up in particular?
It's still functioning. The issue we've heard from our maintenance folks, that we have a contract emergency generator maintenance vendor. It's getting really hard to find parts for it, which is kind of typical for emergency generators. You can keep them running, but then it's like the manufacturers almost phase them out because it's like it gets really hard to find parts. So we are looking at that as replacement. And then also at the fire department, as discussed in previous meetings, they would like to start looking at renovating the firehouse to accommodate, I guess overnight or sleeping quarters. Thank you. Yeah, sleeping quarters. So this would be the first step, sort of similar to the police department, what they're doing downstairs right now too. And then parks, we haven't, I will say, like, it's been difficult to fit parks in the capital plan, so we wanted to make an effort this year to start trying to put some funding away for Parks Department and Reserve, especially as they're chasing grants and doing things like that. Like, obviously it's a lot easier to chase grants if you have some match funding in the bank that you could utilize. So, speaking with Ray's team, they're looking at some projects in the future that using the open space master plan some reserve funding to help support that would help them along. And then there's 2 other parks adjacent projects. They're kind of really infrastructure projects next to a park, but I'll talk about those on the next few slides. So this is super hard to see, but so what we're proposing to do is for the FY26 coming year is we're looking at, it's really hard to tell, apologize, Bellevue Street, Lower Bellevue Street and Upper Dion. It's on the on the east side of town. On the upper, it's the red. Red is bad. Red is like pavement is shot and needs to be resurfaced. So that's kind of the area we're looking at for FY26. We do say targeted because we do some cursory reviews, earlier in the year to look at catch basins and structures and try to do as much video inspection of the utilities. But sometimes if there's a water main break or something like that, it's like, okay, we need to evaluate the utilities a little further and see if we can accommodate doing some underground work before the paving. So that's why we caveat it with target, because we still have time-wise, we still have a bit before we get to that paving. But that's where we're targeting for FY26. That also includes even further on the east side, the sidewalk and curbing work that we're trying to get a bid out that was mentioned, that we moved bond money over. So that's another project we're looking at. And then again, on here, Main Street obviously is another big paving project we're doing next year. And then we're also still looking at, we're working with V-Trans on Lower East Spring Street at the Hoods Crossing to try to get that paved and get the sidewalk in. So that's probably the construction activity you'd see. This map, it's obviously a lot cleaner in your packets. You can kind of see what's going on, but this gives sort of a 5-year forecast of where we're thinking of paving. It shows where we've done some paving in the previous years. This year was really good because we were able to get in a lot of sidewalk and curbing work on Audette, Hall, and Reginald Street. So I will say it was probably like half of the budget this year went to sidewalks and the other half sort of went to resurfacing, which, it's sometimes that's what you have to do because otherwise you're paving and your curbing's destroyed, and you kind of have to look at it as a holistic sort of transportation system. So yeah, we spent a little bit more on the sidewalk and curbing this year than typical, but I think it was definitely worth it. And we have some really good specifications and details now that we can use for future bids and projects. So that was really helpful.
John, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that you did that strategically even so. Like there were some sections of sidewalk that were okay and you didn't touch them. You didn't redo good sidewalk and save some money that way.
Yeah, correct. So it's, as mentioned previously, sidewalk is incredibly expensive, like $200 a linear foot. So we would go out and basically inspect and do just sections of sidewalk that were in poor condition or curbing that was in poor condition. And that's a really cost-effective way that we can still kind of maintain infrastructure without doing like, okay, even though this sidewalk's fine, let's replace it because in order to get that done.
John, I will say, having seen this image for several years in a row now, it looks like we're making progress towards less red, more green.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be requesting Chittenden County Regional Planning to help us with updated pavement condition index rating, and we'll see where we land. I think we're going to be much better than when we started. So yeah, I do think we're progressing. A lot of it thanks to you all for helping us increase the paving budget and getting it to a much more sustainable place, so that every season we're trying to get, our future goal is to do a mile a year, a centerline mile a year of paving. That would be ideal. We're usually about 0.6, you know. This year, I think we're like 0.5, but we did a lot of sidewalk work too, so.
So the 500K, whatever reserves, curbing, sidewalk replacement, that's all the bond shifted money for Rogers, Bernard, Gale, et cetera.
Yep.
So then the 225,000 total for annual street resurfacing, this is for, what'd you say, Dion and Bellevue. Is that what your target annual paving would be for now?
Yes.
And that's only getting us 0.6 when we want to be at a full mile?
Correct, yep. Yeah, so the 225 will probably get us just the Lower Bellevue, Upper Dion, and then we'll try to go as far as we can on, I think, Bellevue Street, and, you know, try to get as much as that whole upper corridor there that you can kind of see highlighted in yellow. But yes, that's usually what we end up doing, is about 0.6 with 225K. And it depends, like asphalt prices fluctuate, you know, contract prices fluctuate, so it's not linear, but that's last few years, that's pretty much where we've been.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a question?
I was just gonna say, one thing that might be helpful, especially since it's very difficult to read the fine print in your call-out boxes, is either having, like, shifting the image to the side slightly, or having an additional slide that captures, like, the work that has been completed.
Sure.
Because I think looking at the map, you see a lot of green, but it's hard to differentiate when that work was completed, and just how much has been in the recent past versus, you know, a couple more years ago in our fiscal budget. So, you know, just a recommendation as something that would help, another way to capture the information and speak to all the work that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'll get away from this terrible graphic. So this is just the other sketch the parks, sort of parks projects that we're looking at. So one is at Landry Park. We have some stormwater regulatory work to do as part of our phosphorus control plan. So in the chart that you can kind of, it's hard to read, but those are the projects that are listed in our stormwater phosphorus control plan that need to be performed by 2036. So number one is installing a sand filter system at Landry Park. What we're targeting is below the parking lot. So there's an opportunity there to kind of improve that parking lot. There's opportunity to create more parking capacity there. We'll work with Ray's team and look at probably combining that curb cut that's there and making it one parking area. So that's what that funding would support, is sort of the general fund scope of this mostly stormwater project. And then the other project that we're looking at that we've internally at DPW we've talked about for a while now, trying to tackle, is at Gilbrook Reservoir. There's a sheet pile structural wall that was we think installed in the 70s. Our oldest employee does not know. So Stevie, our mechanic, if he doesn't know, yeah, exactly. It's like nobody knows. So as anyone who's been up there, who's observed it, there's a lot of corrosion, particularly on the roadside where there's road salt. So we are looking to do a sort of initial structural review of that, which means hiring a structural engineer. We may have to lower the reservoir for a period just to review the whole sheet pile. And then ultimately we're looking at either what repairs would be necessary to bid out, or worst case is like a full replacement. When we get into sort of that phase two, after we learn what the appropriate repair would be, we would engage Ray's team, because I think there's a lot of opportunities at that trailhead to improve that. So, obviously there's that road is extremely close to the reservoir, so installing some type of curbing to, try to eliminate some of that stormwater runoff getting into the reservoir for water quality purposes. The trailhead itself could be improved, so that would be like a phase 2, but this initial step would tell us, what repairs we would need to do on that sheet pile wall. So, I believe that is it for the capital plan items. Any questions on that?
Yeah, let's take some, and if you could please come up to the microphone and introduce yourself so anyone online can hear and it'll be captured in the recording.
It's hard from the plan to see whether, where sidewalks are being dealt with.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
Right? It's almost impossible, and my question is simply, is the stretch of Franklin Street between La Fountain and Spring scheduled for work, sidewalk work? There are no sidewalks.
John, previously you've had a sidewalk image similar to this.
Yeah, last year so this year we combined capital and sewer, and so I kept it a little more overview. So there are many streets, especially in that side of town, that do not have sidewalks, primarily because the right-of-way is really narrow. Manso Street is one that we've tried to get a sidewalk on. Are you referring to, did you say Franklin Street?
It's like
itself?
From between La Fountain
Yeah.
and Spring on Franklin, there is no sidewalk on either side of the street. It's a very heavily used pedestrian street. There are always people in the street. Traffic moves too rapidly on that street. I do both too fast driving probably on that street and walking on that street, jumping up onto the side.
Mhm.
If there's parking on one side of the street, so it's very close for two cars to pass simultaneously. It is a very dangerous street to be on, and I'm not talking just about adults. Lots of school kids walk that street up to the school, and I think it's a menace, and I think the city should pay some attention to that.
Yeah.
On an urgent basis before we have a situation that all of us will regret.
Yep. So in our master plan, our transportation master plan, it does specifically call out to add a sidewalk on, the goal is to add a sidewalk on every street that does not have a sidewalk. So that is kind of like the overarching goal. Typically what we do is when we're putting together a paving program in particular, that's when we're looking at, okay, how do we get a sidewalk in? So right now, we are looking at trying to fit a sidewalk from Hood's Crossing up to Russell Street on East Spring Street. So that's kind of the priority right now. That's another location that is in our transportation master plan is specifically called out as this needs to have a sidewalk right now. And I agree, Franklin is another street that is in need of a sidewalk. All of the streets that have no sidewalks should have a sidewalk on them.
You were talking about doing some sidewalk replacement on Bellevue, did I hear that correctly?
Yes, so not on Bellevue, but we are doing a paving project on the east side of town, which includes Florida, Gale, Reginald, Bernard. And before we do the paving, we need to replace the curbing because the curbing is basically gone. There's no reveal. And so while we're doing the curbing, we're replacing the sidewalk. So
But you're not planning to do any on Bellevue itself from Franklin to Main Street?
Not right now.
Okay, I was
Yep,
confused.
Yep.
I was confused.
Yep.
But I would just reiterate, I think Lower Franklin is an absolutely high priority area, frankly, other places are less heavily trafficked than that particular street, but I haven't done a systematic inventory of either, so I'm not in a position to say, and you probably know those things better, but I just want to make the case for that.
We appreciate the contribution and hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did anyone else want to come up for questions, comments? Anyone online? Okay, please continue.
Okay, so jumping out of general fund and into the water and sewer funds. So these are tentative because there's a few things sort of still at play in the budgets. Namely one, I'll get into it, but so for FY26, these are proposed water rate increases. On the water side, 6.7% increase, and then the sewer side, 13.9% increase. If we hold those, what that equates to for a typical 3-bedroom household is about $28 additional per quarter for both combined.
Do we have a sense of how many homes are, have we done any analysis to have a sense of how many homes are on the high end? Like, would there, just thinking about the equity factor of homes that may have see a higher impact from this change?
We haven't, I can check in with Angela to see how we could potentially look at that, because it is, I will say, seeing like, I don't see there's Angela. I don't see the background of all the water rates and the costs, but from what I have seen, they're all over the place.
Okay.
Generally, I don't know, Angela, if have any thoughts on that?
They are all over the place. We do a reporting every quarter when we do utility billing for our top 15 bill payers, just to make sure that it's people that we're expecting, that it's not a single family home. But it is skewed because we have so many multifamily properties. A lot of those just have a single water meter that services multiple units. We also see that a lot in our condo developments where there's a single meter servicing all of the units within a building. So it's gonna range on its impact to people, and it is directly related to the amount of consumption. So there is a little bit of control that people have over the amount of usage, but it is very subjective to lifestyle and the way that people are functioning. So a family that's got a lot of young children and is doing a lot of laundry, has in-house laundry, it's going to see a bigger impact than somebody that uses a laundromat. And laundromats are also going to see a pretty significant impact. They're some of our higher users.
John, can you go into detail on why these are so high compared
Sure.
to our other increases?
Yeah, and I'll do it for each one as I get into the budget. That's probably the easiest way to go through it. So FY26 water fund budget, this is the general breakdown of each of the sort of cost centers. We are looking at a budget of 1.2 million. Of note, 50% of that is purchasing potable treated water from Champlain Water District. So in this instance, on the water fund side, the Champlain Water District is, I think they're voting on it this week, but they are currently projecting to increase the rates by 5%. So that is one of the increases that we're seeing, given that it is such a large part of our budget.
Is that, and that's reflected in this number?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So I made an estimate of 5%, a month or two ago, and
Okay.
it's just kind of happenstance that it's landing there. So we'll know this week
Okay.
for sure what that number will be, but that's included in this. So that is one reason. The other kind of bigger reason is the Main Street project we're starting to get capital payments coming in. So for Main Street, We are anticipating our first USDA payment for one of the loans, which is $50,000. But we also have an interim financing payment that's coming up. So Angela and I are going to look at that a little bit closer too, because that is increasing the budget a bit. Because until FY27, the Main Street payments aren't going to really stabilize, and we'll know for sure like what our annual payments will be. We have estimates, but there's also kind of a cash flow challenge with Main Street because we have interim financing that we have to pay interest on. So it makes it a little trickier. So Angela and I are working on that now. I know you all will approve this usually in February, I believe. So we've got a little bit of time to just look a little closer at this to see if we can try to reduce that. But ultimately our goal is we do projections, rate projections out with the capital plan. And so as Main Street debt comes online, at least for the waterfront fund, this would be our biggest increase projection. And then it would drop to around, this is forecasts, but we're looking at around 4.6% FY27. And then once Main Street debt stabilizes, we'd be getting back to like 3%, 2%, 2%. And that includes our proposed capital budgets too. So like, you know, expensive equipment replacements are included in that number. And now we're starting to put money towards capital reserves for water distribution replacement, which is probably one of our biggest needs. And one of our biggest sort of pain points on the water fund is the distribution piping. Like, as you can see, that's not a sewer pipe. That's a water main pipe that's in the top right corner that I took a photo of as we're cutting out pipe sections on Main Street. So if that's any indication of the 100-year water mains that we have in the city, you know, we have some work to do. So we are trying to build up this fund a little bit. It did not help, you know, having no rate increases for such a long period prior to us trying to catch up to the Main Street debt. But to answer your question, that's kind of what the reasoning is one, that existing Main Street capital debt and some of the interim financing payments plus the CWD water purchase. But yeah, for at least the water fund this year, really no major changes from previous years. As you can see from the FY25 budget, the operational costs, the $1,056,000 versus the $1,091,000 that's proposed for FY26, not a major difference given salary increases. So the other thing that we're looking at too is this includes a budget for a utility manager, which is I would say pretty unlikely. We're likely going to have a lower salary staff person in that role, so that could also help lower that number. But yeah, you can see here in the bottom two, the capital expense number is going from 83,000 to 139. That's the Main Street value.
I'm going to interrupt here because it's timely. So I think in a previous week, John noted that if we had a lower salaried employee managing utilities, that means more time from the city engineer and the public works director to be leading that aspect of the department. And Brian and John have done a lot of grant work. And so this ties, again, back into the economic vitality, the community economic development officer position, and all that sort of pieces. If that's the direction it goes, there's going to be some squeeze in another direction. There might be some squeeze in another direction.
Thanks for pulling that out.
Before I get into sewer budget, which is very similar, any questions on the water fund budget?
Can you just remind me what supports we have for homes that struggle to pay the quarterly bills?
Yeah, Angela, you might be able to help me out with that one.
So I missed the last part of the question.
Sorry, I'll ask again. I asked for a reminder on what support systems, payment plans we have available for homes that struggle to meet the quarterly
Yep.
payments.
So we offer payment agreements here in the city, and what we have implemented is if somebody comes in prior to a bill's due date and enters into a payment agreement with us, as long as they are current on that payment agreement, they are not incurring penalty or interest. That is not our priority to collect. We want the principal payments whenever possible. If somebody comes in after the due date, they can still enter into a payment agreement and make payments with us to avoid disconnection. However, they are still subject to interest and penalty. And that essentially resets every quarter. So if somebody missed that window one quarter, they can come in before their next bill is due and re-up to get into that interest-free window. We have a few people, I think I generally have about a dozen at a time that are on active payment agreements, and it has helped a lot of people catch up. We do also offer leak adjustments for properties that have experienced something like a running toilet, a water heater that has burst, or any other type of water leak where they can, once every 4 years, submit for an adjustment to their bill for an extraordinary event. As long as it's been repaired, we will adjust their bill back down to their average, and they only have to pay us the amount that we have to pay to CWD for the additional water. And then depending on the type of leak, we may reduce their sewer bill unless it had to go down to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I will
Sewer time.
go on to the last bit. All right. So sewer fund, bigger budget. We do have, excuse me, a wastewater treatment plant. So much more costlier to operate. And then we also, this is almost 2 departments in one because sanitary, sewer distribution, and stormwater are in this budget as well. Some municipalities split that. We've looked at that a little bit, but there's not a lot of, it doesn't gain us much besides more paperwork at the end of the day because everyone's on sewer, so versus like a Colchester, for example. So in this case, the budget is 1.6 million proposed. This budget, most of our cost center is on the salary and benefits side. And then capital is a fairly large number, given the wastewater treatment plant in particular. So going into a little bit more detail. Again, as you can see, the operational side isn't really changing too much, mostly on the benefits and salary side. But as you get into the capital expenses, that's where you see the increase. So, for example, again, there's no new capital proposed. This is Main Street starting to get online. So we are forecasting our first Main Street debt payment in FY26 of $96,000. But we are also looking at an interim interest payment of $180,000. There's a net there because we do have some. We are investing some of that funding, so we're getting some return back on that. So there is a little bit of funding that's coming back to us, but that is the primary cost increase there. So again, we're going to be looking at that a little bit more detail. This also includes the utility manager, which is unlikely, but we're showing it conservatively. So yeah, there isn't too much in this budget that's new. I will say, overview, treatment plant's in very good shape. We've done some very strategic investments down there. Kudos to our operators and our utility manager. The Headworks project, they've done some aeration equipment upgrades. They've really done a great job maintaining that plant, and there'll be more sort of investments coming, but not like on, across the river where it's like a giant bond request. It's more of like very small increment projects that we're looking at. Most of the costs that we would be looking at for future debt are on the distribution side. So as we're doing a road reconstruction project, replacing sanitary sewer lines, things like that.
Do you have rate increase projections for this like you did for water?
Yeah. So for sewer fund right now, if we're looking at the 13.9 rate increase, that absorbs most of the Main Street debt in one shot because we're paying that low interest loan payment. So for FY27, we're getting back to right now I'm projecting a 2%, FY28 3.5, FY29 2.5.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I will take this opportunity to mention too that one of the investments that I'm expecting to bring to council for a reserve request before flooding season starts in the spring might be hardening of the treatment plant. So we've had a really good team and team effort to flood proof the little bit that we need still and the flood levels that we saw in July 2023. We're proactive now, we know what to do, but it's a lot of work to clean up after. It's basically tarps and sand. I don't understand hydrologically why that works, but it does. We have applied for a grant, we've put in for it. We're shortlisted. However, FEMA is not giving out any more money, unless it's like life or death. And so unfortunately, such a very smart, proactive, hardening projects like this are a lower priority just because there's so little funding. So I do not want to wait until we're in that situation. So I might come back to council with a reserve request to just get that taken care of. But it's dependent on staff capacity too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've been trying to chase some grants. I know our utility manager has been in even conversations this week with DEC. One of the issues is we don't have damage because our crews are good at like keeping the plant safe. So versus, some other treatment plants that were really devastated when the flooding occurred. But yeah, it was close. Some late nights from our crew, just protecting a plant and making sure things are operational. So yeah, we'll continue to chase grants, but fortunately our crew's really good at protecting the plant in the middle of the night, which doesn't help on the grant side, but is really good for, our ratepayers.
That answered the one question I had, which was just on what's going on for flood preparedness.
Yeah, and they have recently they did some smaller scale work protecting. We have our last treatment system is a chlorine contact tank, and within the last 2 weeks they were able to get some steel sheets and they protected one section and prefabbed some flood protection there. So we're doing stuff DIY when we can, and it's cost effective, but now we're getting sort of the more expensive flood wall type work that we have some quotes. It's not like crazy expensive. We're talking like $50,000-$60,000 in some cases, but when we're trying to keep rates really low, that's adding $50,000 is tough right now when we're trying to pay for Main Street debt and keep our operations going. Okay, with that's everything. Do you have any questions?
Any more council questions? Anyone else have questions or comments? If you're on Zoom, you can use raise hand or chat to let us know. Okay. Thanks, John. Frankly, I'm surprised that I'll fit into an hour compared to last year with the two separate things. So
it was pretty high level.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rabbit holes you could go down.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it worked.
I'm going to call a 5-minute recess. So at 8:05, we will reconvene. worried I would need it today. Thankfully, I didn't.
Yes, luckily.
Okay. We are reconvening on item F. So John, please come back for your strategic vision update.
I can give it. Are there any questions?
Yeah, it's funny, I totally forgot about that. So this is our second installment of our policies, priorities, work plan for infrastructure. So I would say a lot of it we just talked about. So I'll leave it to you all if you have any further questions on any of the specific items.
Anyone have questions on this one?
I don't think so. I love all the proceeding as planned green.
It wasn't like that last year, but we're okay this year.
I think the only thing that I would want to speak to is, in terms of the Main Street, we're coming towards the end of the first of hopefully only 2 construction seasons. My hope is that we can work with the communications team, to make sure that there's some more proactive communication with businesses and residents ahead of next construction season starting. Happy to participate in any planned engagement. I know that we always have a number of engagements year-round, so if there's anything that would be of help for some type of gathering, convening of any sort, I certainly would be interested to participate in that. I know that there's lots of work that goes into it, and there will always be something more that could be done. So it's not to say that there wasn't a really good effort that went into it. But there's always continuous improvement. I think
Sure.
it's just what I'm saying. And if there's anything we can do for, the timing of things is always difficult, especially with weather, but if there was a way to do one of the close off a section of Main Street for a barbecue or a meet and greet or something, or even just a section, I don't know. Brainstorming on the flies here, so not trying to come up with any particular solution, but just some things to consider.
Yeah, to your point, we actually did do, I'd say, a decent amount of public outreach ahead, and it was very difficult to get attention because people didn't see what it was going to do.
Yeah.
I think it'll be much easier this time, and there's already been some interest to have an earlier meeting with for the business community in particular. We've talked about that, so I think actually some of them might host on their site, and then that again would make it easier for people to go.
Great.
Yeah, that's pretty aligned with what we've been discussing as a kickoff for next season construction, doing some sort of engagement or, some kind of more educational outreach event, something along those lines. It's a little more festive and,
exactly.
Here's what's coming. But, we'll definitely be working on that this winter to try to figure out what the best approach is. Main Street, one thing I will say that's, I don't think necessarily included, obviously we're wrapping up this winter work. The last thing we're trying to do is get the corridor open for 2-way traffic this winter. This weather's not really helping us right now, but the plan is right now to, the crews are going to be removing equipment and all their signage and installing signage that will allow the 2-way traffic this week. And we're trying to find a window for the line striper to come in and do painting work. It's looking like they're thinking they might be able to swing it this week, but I don't know. So it might be early next week. But plan is to get center lines in, fog lines or shoulder lines. They're trying to do crosswalks and make it look, basically like it was pre-construction for the winter. So
Great.
it should be back to normal-ish next week or two.
And if you're wondering if we waited too late to get the lines striping, no, we didn't, but the weather wasn't holding up, they didn't come, so we've been trying to get them here.
I actually did not have that thought. But
In case anyone was.
yeah.
I also wanted to call out that it's, the project is under budget so far.
Yeah, we are, we do monthly budget reports to USDA, our primary financer. We did include a fairly healthy contingency, just given all the underground work. And I think to date, don't quote me on this, but I believe when we were last talking, we're about $1 million under our budget right now. Still have a season to go, so we'll see how that works. But yeah, so far so good.
I just wanted to say briefly on the having a more celebratory kickoff. I feel like, yeah, getting that chance to show people what it's going to look like, because I feel like that's a conversation I have with a lot of folks, both in and outside of Winooski, of like, well, I don't understand why they're doing it. I'm like, it's gonna look so good. I pinky promise it will look so good once it's done. So getting more of those visuals out might help.
Yeah, I'm hoping, next spring they'll be completing some of the lower section south of Spring Street, where they'll start planting trees and doing the green belts and even some of the new painting work. So hopefully folks will get a taste of kind of what's coming for the rest of the corridor and maybe start getting excited about it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any public comment? Oh, please join us at the microphone, Sue.
So John, I have a question. I was speaking to one of the co-owners of one of the businesses just over the Colchester line, and they were wondering about the whole communication piece with them. Even though they're in Colchester, obviously they're impacted. They're in that little strip mall that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, just feeling, could they be part of the conversation?
Yeah, so if you have their contact, we could get them on the email distribution list and make sure they're getting all the project.
Yeah, and maybe I'll try to get everyone else in that strip area there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is one group that it's hard to get outside of Winooski. Like inside Winooski, we're okay. We do okay as far as communication. But
Okay. Well, I'll help you with that.
yeah,
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
All right. Thank you for the updates. We'll move on to item G, on for discussion, certified local government designation. All right, thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thanks. So the CLG program, it's a historic preservation program. It's administered by the National Park Service and the Vermont Department of Historic Preservation. It's focused on education and outreach and communicating to the community the benefits and just information about the historic resources that are in that community. The benefits for us is additional funding for planning and rehabilitation projects, and it provides more status for the municipality in the review process for any federal projects that affects historic properties. We then have a formal role in the identification, evaluation, and protection of historic resources. And it provides us direct access to the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation for assistance for building assessments, survey nominations, eligibility, tax credits, general preservation assistance. It basically lends credibility to the community, to the National Park Service and the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation on the fact that we are making efforts to recognize historic resources in our community. We've done pretty much most of the application. Much of it is thanks to the efforts of past staff, the Local Resources Advisory Board, and a lot of the conversations that we've already had at the beginning of this year with the adoption of the ordinance language for the Local Resources Advisory Board. This program, I think more importantly, at least for me, it provides more capacity to administer those regulations. So we can use that funding to help with creating design review guidelines that'll help communicate to applicants on how they can go about with improvements to their properties in a way that meets historic preservation guidelines. That's something that's missing in our regulations. So when applicants do ask me like, hey, what do I have to do to meet the standards of this regulations? I'm like, that's a great question. These are the general standards, and we'll just have to see what the board thinks, which is not the best guidance to provide to applicants. I think applicants typically come to me and say, tell me what you want, give me clear-cut guidance, and we will go from there. And without providing that clear-cut guidance, it's difficult for applicants to build according to the city's needs and interests. So with that, there are a couple members of the Local Resource Advisory Board here too. I'll turn it back to you for any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Ravi. I want to emphasize what you were just saying, that we made a lot of changes in zoning as a community to make the process clearer and more streamlined to spur development of housing. And so the lack of clarity in what we adopted for historic preservation is a problem. Not only for that side of the discussion, but for our board members having some guidance to work from and to direct their work. I am generally supportive of us moving forward with the CLG program to give you access to grant funding to try to create this guidance that we need, and would just raise 2 points. One is that we want to make sure that this is low lift for staff capacity, because it isn't on the highest priority list that we have. And then 2, I wanted to reemphasize from both Planning Commission and Council discussions about historic preservation that we do not want to be super stringent, super inhibitive to reuse of buildings into housing creation. So should we move forward with this and you be able to secure a grant and a consultant and do that work? Just wanted to keep those council guidance in mind. And I will also note that I believe this is also an item we did not warn correctly for approval, so we'll spend this time in discussion and questions and then take the action at the next special meeting.
You took my comment away from me.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, this is only up for discussion. And I was wondering if there was a reason why, actually. Yes, I think that there has been quite a bit of effort in just the recent past that has gone into a number of studies, the Local Resource Advisory Board. I think we are finally beginning to feel like there's space where we can prioritize housing development needs and also ensure that we are retaining the historic properties and a lot of the meaning of the structures that have been there that just have so much value. We've seen a number of community members come out and really vocalize their desire to retain those properties. So I think I'm not opposed to anything that brings in more grant funds. And I second the mayor in saying, like, there's quite a lot of work that we do have in our annual strategies and priorities and just zoning ordinance changes. So I would want to just make sure that we're balancing both.
I guess my one question is really, are there any potential cons to this? It seems like mostly good stuff.
Yeah, no. I was curious about that myself, so I reached out to a bunch of CLG coordinators throughout the state just to get their sense of what's your capacity, what's your time, how much have you spent on these projects, what have been the benefits, what have been the caveats, and everything that I've heard back is, this is great. There hasn't really been much of an administrative cost or administrative burden on them. And that they've more so like taken it upon themselves and shepherded these projects forward too. I think some of the projects that they've pushed forward are pretty exceptional. But at least the way that I see it is that with the regulations that we have currently, doing this is part of carrying those regulations out, and it's part of that responsibility. So I think what's in the ordinance right now goes hand in hand with what the program's goals and objectives are and what we can get from the program.
Wonderful. And thinking about like developing those two, as the mayor stated about the housing priority, can we even kind of build those guidelines with our housing needs and housing priorities as part of that?
Yeah, I think there's a way to do it through the guidelines that allows for a certain amount of flexibility and cognizance of the context. I feel like the board's already done that already with the last application that they reviewed and took that into an understanding of what is Winooski's character and how do we make sure that whatever's being proposed fits in line with the historic nature of the building, so that way the interpretation of it isn't lost, but also the context of Winooski today and its culture. So based on that, I feel pretty confident that that can also be carried out in text.
Awesome.
in the guidelines.
Awesome. Thank you.
I have no concerns. I have a lot of faith in Ravi. I think the documentation that he's provided is very compelling. And it just seems logical to fall in line with the other municipalities in the state that are, doing the same kind of work and trying to preserve their historic resources.
Any questions or comments from the public? If you're on Zoom, chat. Oh, looks like we have a hand raised here, Paul. If you could bring Britta over. Ooh.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Britta.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to put a plug in for this program. It's amazing. I've worked on CLG projects, funded projects throughout the state, and the design review guidelines, that's an important piece, but there's just so much opportunity to do so much cool stuff. Like the town of Hartford has been doing oral histories about various topics that are important to their history and heritage and various cultures. So, it's thinking outside the box. The sky's really the limit when it comes to finding an interesting project to propose for the year that relates in some way to heritage. So kind of thinking, beyond just also sometimes just the preservation of buildings, but looking at cultural contexts. And then of course there's, the idea of survey, like really trying to understand what are the important resources we have in Winooski. As you all know, Winooski has not been studied comprehensively. Its historic architecture and neighborhoods for a really long time, and certain areas have never been looked at. So that's another common use of CLG grant money that communities use, is to kind of take a fresh look at either an existing historic district or an area with historic buildings that's never been studied before. So I want to put those out there as some other opportunities that you could use with grant money.
Thanks for sharing, Britta. All right. It sounds like someone wants to... No, shoot. We'll have this in our consent agenda on our next meeting agenda so we can take the actual action. But for folks who are paying attention, we intend to approve this as soon as we can. Yes. Thank you, Ravi.
Good, because we hope to make real progress on it. Once we get this certification behind us and can start to try to raise funds and organize projects and bring this as a interesting concern and educationally valuable, culturally rich experience for people who live in this town.
Thank you for your commitment and support with that. We'll get it underway very soon. So that brings us to item H, also improperly warned as discussion only. Overview and introduction of amendments to Unified Land Use and Development Regulations, Act 181. Please introduce, Ravi.
Okay. The changes are really, really minor. It's like the TLDR is that the changes are so minor that I'm removing one letter from certain parts in order to align it with statute. But to go into a little bit deeper, much of Act 181 has to do with Act 250 changes, and much of that work is on the regional planning commissions. And so we are working with the regional planning commissions to help with updating those regional maps, and we'll see more of that in the coming months. But alongside those changes came these minor changes to the regulations in terms of public hearing notices and making sure that applications to the DRB are promptly heard to basically fill that loophole. Allowing for residential uses to use parking off-site, which currently in Winooski is not allowed in our residential districts. And also with that to provide protections for the conversions of hotel and motel uses into affordable housing, which is part of many different initiatives and programs that have occurred in the past few years. So to ensure that our regulations are in line with statute, Planning Commission and I are proposing these minor changes to the regulations.
Essentially, we have to do them, Planning Commission reviewed them and forwarded them on to us. We have a Planning Commissioner present with their hand raised. Paul, can we bring Sarah over?
Yeah, this is Sarah Van Rickenborster.
Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, actually, I was trying to raise my hand for the last.
Oh, shucks.
So I'm sort of out of date now. What I wanted to say was that we have put in something which I think is kind of unique in Winooski, which is a few really cool incentive things that we did around historic preservation that the City Council approved. I don't know if you guys remember that.
I do.
And it's just kind of it's sort of a fresh way of looking at it. And it just, we can do really inventive things in the city. And I encourage getting let me get this right, the local certified government program into Winooski. I think it's a really no-brainer. So that was my comments.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, guys.
Sorry about the timing.
That's all right.
Back to Act 181 changes. Are there questions from councilors?
I don't know any.
Pretty straightforward. And no public comments? Okay. So we need to, and cannot right now, introduce and set a public hearing date. And have you recommended a public hearing date?
I believe the recommended date was January 27th.
Okay.
That meeting's gonna be hot then.
It is. When we are able to take the action on this, are folks good with that date?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Revy.
Thank you.
Sorry for the lackluster ending to your items. We have reached the end of this evening's meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brent, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Motion carries, meeting adjourned. Thank you.